The warrior's burden. The fire in the council chamber spat and hissed, its flickering light painting grotesque masks on the faces surrounding Kestrel. He stood rigid, ostensibly focused on the chief, but his vision blurred with the noxious haze, an external manifestation of the inner turmoil that threatened to drown him. The chief's pronouncements, each word a deliberate hammer blow, amplified the pressure building within. The newcomers encroach, the chief intoned, his voice a dry rustle of autumn leaves. Their fences choke the land, their plows rip the flesh of our mother. Our warnings fall on deaf ears. Action is imperative. Kestrel anticipated the command, yet a knot tightened in his gut. He had proven his mettle, his allegiance unquestioned. He was their keenest edge, reserved for the most delicate of tasks. Kestrel, the chief stated, his gaze boring into him. Journey to the western border. The Millers have established a homestead there, ignoring repeated warnings. The necessary measures must be taken. Silence descended, heavy as a shroud. Kestrel felt the collective scrutiny of the council, their expectations pressing down like physical weights. A single, economical nod was his response. He understood the code, the rationale, the potential ramifications of inaction. But tonight, the well-worn justifications rang hollow and fragile. Later, beneath a sky bruised with twilight hues, Kestrel sought out a pony. Her humble abode, nestled amongst the soughing pines, offered a sanctuary where the storm raging within him might find some respite. He found her tending her garden, the fragrant essence of herbs saturating the cool air. A pony, he greeted, his voice rasping. She turned, her face a palimpsest of wrinkles, each line hinting at profound wisdom and untold stories. Kestrel, I sense your disquiet. Come sit. He lowered himself beside her onto a smooth, sun-baked stone. He divulged the council's decree, the words erupting in a torrent of pent-up emotion. The Millers, a pony mused, her fingers gently caressing a sprig of lavender. I have seen them. They have 2 young daughters. Mere babes. Kestrel's breath caught. He hadn't been told. He hadn't wanted to know. The chief made no mention of this. The chief sees only the threat to our people, a pony observed gently. He carries his own burdens, Kestrel. But you have always perceived more than the immediate danger. He looked at her, his eyes desperate for understanding, for some form of exoneration. How can I do this, a pony? How can I extinguish innocent lives, even for the sake of our people? A pony reached for his hand, her grasp surprisingly firm. There are no easy answers, Kestrel. Life is an intricate tapestry, and we are sometimes compelled to make choices that scar our souls. But even in the deepest darkness, a single ember can ignite a new dawn. What ember? He pleaded, his voice a mere thread. What light can possibly emerge from this? That is for you to unearth, Kestrel, she replied, her gaze unwavering. The path is laid before you. The manner in which you traverse it is your choice alone. He departed a pony's dwelling with a spirit even more burdened than before. He spent the ensuing hours preparing for his grim task, his movements automatic, devoid of genuine feeling. He honed his blade, the steel reflecting the firelight with predatory gleam. He packed his provisions, dried meat and berries, sufficient for several days' travel. He inspected his bow and arrows, ensuring their accuracy and readiness. But beneath this veneer of competence, a tempest raged. He envisioned the faces of the settlers etched with fear and desperation. He pictured the 2 young girls, their innocence, their defenselessness. He secured his quiver, its weight now crushing. He grasped his bow, the wood feeling alien and frigid against his skin. He gazed up at the immense, stardusted canvas above, and a wave of utter despair threatened to engulf him. He was a warrior, yes, but tonight he felt like nothing more than a disposable piece, caught in a vice between duty and morality, destined for defeat regardless of his actions. He closed his eyes, and a solitary tear charted a course down his cheek, a testament to the agonizing burden he now bore. A distant smoke. Dampness clung to the forest floor, leaching into Kestrel's moccasins. Each dew-kissed leaf seemed to murmur doubts, questions he couldn't bear to voice. He slipped through the trees, a ghost in woods now haunted by his purpose. The air, once a balm, pressed down on him, thick with unspoken accusations. His hand instinctively stayed near the knife at his side as he pressed onward. Half the day dissolved before he crested the rise, granting him a view of the farm. A slender ribbon of blue smoke spiraled from the chimney, a promise of warmth and home that twisted his gut. He found concealment behind a dense thicket, the rough bark abrasive against his spine. The homestead was spare, a compact cabin built by hand, a small, fenced garden, and a lean-to providing shelter for a single milk cow. No men were visible. Only a woman and 2 little girls. The woman, Lily, he assumed, possessed a quiet strength, her movements efficient as she hung clothes on a line strung between trees. Her hair, the color of sun-ripened wheat, was braided, and her face, though marked by the elements, possessed a resilient beauty. She hummed a wordless tune, her voice carried on the faint breeze. The girls frolicked by the garden, their laughter sounding like wind chimes. The younger, Rose, played hide-and-seek behind a towering sunflower, peeking out with cautious, wide eyes. Lily's call was a gentle chiding, and Rose responded with a giggle, darting out to pursue a passing butterfly. Kestrel observed, his heart leaden and cold. He had anticipated something else entirely. Brutes, perhaps, deserving of their eradication. Instead, he saw only people. Struggling to subsist. Lily knelt by Rose, pointing at something in the soil. Rose clapped, her face radiant with discovery. Kestrel could almost hear the child's bright inquiries, her insistent demands for explanations. Lily responded with patient care, her hand resting protectively on Rose's fragile back. He shifted, discomfort a physical ache, the scene blurring behind a sudden haze of moisture. He recalled his own mother, her weathered hands instructing him in the arts of tracking, of deciphering the forest's language. He thought of a pony, her unwavering wisdom. Would they understand this act? Could they forgive it? The older girl skipped to Lily, presenting a small bouquet of wildflowers. Lily accepted them, inhaling their fragrance, then tenderly tucked one behind the girl's ear. Their embrace was a silent pledge, a powerful bond exchanged. A wave of nausea washed over Kestrel. He squeezed his eyes shut, the image burned into his mind's eye. He saw not invaders, not trespassers, but mothers and daughters. Sisters. He saw life, delicate and vibrant, flourishing in a place where death alone should hold dominion. He opened his eyes. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky with strokes of crimson and gold. Lily guided the girls toward the cabin, their forms silhouetted against the fading light. Rose stumbled and Lily swept her up, cradling her close. Kestrel's fingers tightened around the knife's hilt. The chief's directive hammered in his skull, a relentless pulse against the surging tide of his conscience. He was a warrior bound by honor. Yet what value had duty if it demanded the slaying of innocents? What was honor worth if it meant the desecration of his very being? He remained an observer until the cabin door closed, leaving only the faintest glimmer spilling from the window. He remained until darkness consumed the forest, and the distant smoke became a phantom of memory. He lingered there, immobile, until the dawn's first light kissed the horizon. His resolve a weight heavier than any burden he had ever borne. The father's departure. The winch's rusty complaint ripped the dawn's quiet. 100 yards off, secreted amongst the charred ribs of a wrecked wagon, Kestrel spied the father drawing water. The man's build was stocky, each movement precise, honed by a life of physical toil. He splashed his face, then topped off a canteen hanging from his saddle horn. Kestrel's grip tightened on his rifle. This was the crux, the moment both anticipated and dreaded. The father's absence would make cleansing the homestead simpler. Fewer souls to account for. He eased the rifle down, the reticle sliding from the man's sternum to the worn leather saddlebags. The father secured the canteen, then paused, gaze drawn to the distant trees. A lingering, searching look. Kestrel's breath hitched. Suspicion? An unseen presence? The man sighed, the sound thin on the still air. He turned toward the modest dwelling, disappearing within its shadowed doorway. Kestrel remained frozen, a statue sculpted from tension, expectant. Moments later, the father reappeared, flanked by 2 girls. The elder, perhaps 10, hugged a roughly hewn wooden toy. The younger, barely 5, latched onto his leg like a limpet. He knelt, a calloused hand gently stroking the younger child's hair. His murmur was too soft for Kestrel to decipher, yet the cadence spoke volumes, tenderness, reassurance. A hesitant smile bloomed on the elder girl's face. He ruffled her hair in turn, then rose, his expression hardening into granite. He mounted his horse, the saddle leather groaning beneath his weight. A single, curt nod served as farewell before he spurred the beast into a canter. The girls watched him depart, their faces small and anxious silhouettes in the doorway. As the father vanished down the track, an icy tendril of dread coiled around Kestrel's heart. This should be easier, he reasoned, but it felt far from it. Infinitely more complex. He raised the rifle once more. The house, a humble rectangle of vulnerability, filled his scope. He could extinguish it now. Erase it all. But a pony's words echoed, a jarring counter-melody to the oaths he'd sworn. They are people, Kestrel, not targets. He squeezed his eyes shut, the girls' faces seared onto his inner vision. The younger one clinging, trusting. The elder one offering a small, hopeful smile. He lowered the rifle. The sun continued to climb, bathing the plains in molten gold. Silence descended, punctuated only by the cry of a distant hawk. Kestrel remained unmoving, a figure carved from conflict. The house stood unmolested, a plume of smoke rising from its chimney. He contemplated the after-action reports he'd have to fabricate, the excuses he'd have to offer. Failure was untenable. Yet, fulfilling his assignment felt like a profound violation, a desecration of something he hadn't realized still flickered within him. He envisioned himself approaching the house, weapon in hand. He heard the imagined screams, the phantom terror. He saw the light dying in their eyes. He shook his head, trying to banish the grotesque vision. This was war. Duty demanded it. This was necessary. But the word left a bitter aftertaste. He glanced back at the structure. The girls had vanished from the doorway. He imagined them inside, engaged in play, unaware of the danger that still loomed. A wave of nausea engulfed him. He had to flee. Escape this place, this impossible dilemma that threatened to unravel him. He pushed himself to his feet, his muscles protesting. He turned and walked away from the burned-out wagon, away from the homestead, away from the agonizing moral quandary that threatened to break him. Each step was leaden, burdened by the weight of his conscience, the weight of his obligations, and the terrifying understanding that he no longer possessed the ability to distinguish between the two. Flames of fate. The wind, already a restless hand pushing at Kestrel's back as he walked away from the homestead, shifted into a furious fist. It howled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and something acrid, something sharp and unfamiliar. He glanced back. A plume of smoke, thin and gray, snaked into the sky from beyond the ridge. A cooking fire left unattended, perhaps? He quickened his pace. He was wrong. Within the hour, the gray plume had become a roiling black monster, clawing at the heavens. The wind, now a full-blown gale, whipped the flames into a frenzy, carrying embers like fiery seeds across the dry landscape. The air grew thick with ash, stinging his eyes and coating his tongue with grit. He knew with a chilling certainty that the fire was headed towards the homestead. He broke into a run, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Not out of duty, not anymore. Something else propelled him, something he couldn't name but couldn't deny. It was the memory of Rose's laughter, the trusting way she'd looked at him, the unexpected warmth he'd felt in that small, fragile space. He reached the edge of the clearing just as the first wave of fire swept through, a roaring tide of orange and red. The homestead was engulfed. He saw Lily, her face streaked with soot, frantically trying to lead Rose and her sister towards the creek. The wind tore at their clothes, whipping their hair around their faces, making it nearly impossible to move. "Mama, I'm scared." Rose's voice, high and thin, was almost lost in the roar of the fire. Lily pulled them closer, her eyes wide with a fierce, protective love. "It's all right, darlings. We're going to be all right. Just keep moving." A shower of sparks rained down around them. A large pine, weakened by the flames licking at its base, groaned ominously. "Mama, look out," the younger girl screamed, pointing upwards. Lily glanced up, her eyes widening in horror. There was no time. The tree crashed down, its massive trunk pinning her to the ground. Rose and her sister stumbled back, unharmed but terrified. "Mama!" Rose shrieked, scrambling towards the fallen tree. Kestrel didn't hesitate. He plunged into the inferno, the heat searing his skin, the smoke choking him. He reached Rose and scooped her up, pulling her away from the tree. Her sister, frozen in shock, didn't move. He grabbed her too, dragging both girls a safe distance from the immediate danger. "Mama's trapped." Rose sobbed, struggling in his arms. "We have to help her." Kestrel looked at the fallen tree, at the flames already licking at its branches. He knew with a sinking feeling that it was too heavy to move, even for him. And the fire, it was spreading too fast, consuming everything in its path. He turned back to the children. Rose's face was contorted with grief and terror. Her sister was silent, her eyes wide and vacant. He couldn't save Lily, but he could save them. He looked from the children to the flames, the fire raging around them. He had a choice to make. An impossible choice. A warrior's choice. The wind howled, a rabid wolf tearing at the edges of the conflagration. From the crest of the rise, Kestrel's breath hitched. It wasn't just smoke, it was a holocaust consuming the homestead. The barn was a blazing skeleton outlined against the angry sky. Burning cinders, like fallen stars of wrath, dotted the parched fields, igniting new pockets of fire. Ash and dread permeated the air, thick on his tongue. His mission. The command. They rattled through his skull, empty pronouncements dwarfed by the sheer force of destruction. He was meant to be unseen, unheard, a phantom flitting through the timber, not a spectator to this inferno. Assassinate, not, what? Stand idly by? He spotted Lily faltering near the house, swatting desperately at the hungry flames devouring the clapboard with a sodden blanket. Her struggle was a lost cause, a futile dance against oblivion. He recalled the suspicion in her gaze, laced with a desperate plea. He remembered Rose's small hand nestled in his, brimming with naive trust. He remembered the homely aroma of burning wood mingled with the good earth clinging to her hair. His fingers instinctively curled around the sword's grip. Duty. Allegiance. A sacred oath. But the words crumbled to dust in his awareness. What value did duty possess when weighed against innocent lives? What price was loyalty when it demanded the death of everything he was beginning to recognize as righteous? He could still vanish, fade into the deepening shadows. Let the blaze run its course. No soul would ever know. No one would hold him accountable. Save Rose. Save her sister. Save the specter of a life he was tasked with ending, a life that had unexpectedly sparked a flame within his own frozen heart. His knuckles whitened on the sword's hilt, a desperate anchor against the tempest raging within. A frigid sweat beaded on his forehead. This was the crux. The moment of reckoning. The irreversible decision. With a crisp metallic click, he sheathed the blade. The wildfire bellowed its dominance, yet Kestrel remained deaf to its cries. He was already in motion, a blur against the skyline. He plunged down the incline, oblivious to the scorching earth, the suffocating haze, the keening cries carried on the gale. He moved with a speed fueled by desperation and a nascent purpose, detached from dictates, pledges, or the frigid calculus of his prior existence. The heat intensified with each stride toward the house. Lily was yelling, but her words were swallowed by the roaring chaos. He witnessed her falter, vanishing behind a curtain of flame. Raw, primal fear seized his throat. He crashed through the fiery barrier, disregarding the blistering temperature on his exposed skin, the acrid sting in his eyes. The front entrance was a mass of charred debris. With a savage kick, he splintered what remained, sending fragments flying, and dove into the inferno within. Inside, the house was a furnace, thick with swirling smoke and the violent orchestra of consuming timber. He coughed, his vision blurring, desperately scanning for any sign of habitation. Last words. The heat was a physical blow. Kestrel coughed, smoke stinging his eyes as he stumbled further into the inferno. He could hear the roar of the flames, the crackling devouring the wood with insatiable hunger. Where was she? Where were the girls? He spotted her. Half buried beneath a fallen beam, one of the support trees holding up the roof, its thick trunk pinning her legs. Flames licked at the edges of her dress. He lurched towards her, ignoring the searing pain in his lungs. Hold on, he shouted, though he doubted she could hear him over the chaos. He gripped the beam, muscles screaming as he heaved. It wouldn't budge. Desperation lent him strength he didn't know he possessed. He braced his feet, digging them into the floorboards, and pulled again. This time, the tree groaned, shifting enough for him to drag her free. He pulled her away from the immediate danger, laying her gently on the least burnt patch of floor he could find. Her face was pale, streaked with soot and blood. He recognized the dark, matted patch on her forehead. Another beam must have hit her on the head. The girls, she gasped, her voice a ragged whisper. Lily. Rose, I'll find them, Kestrel promised, his voice hoarse. Just stay still. He started to rise, but she clutched at his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. No, listen to me. Her eyes, wide with pain, locked onto his. Promise me, promise you'll protect them. Kestrel hesitated. Protect them? From whom? From what? From him? But the plea in her eyes was undeniable, a desperate mother's final wish. I promise, he said, the words a solemn vow. A flicker of relief crossed her face. They're good girls. Lily is strong. Rose is gentle. They need someone. Please, her grip loosened, her breathing became shallow and ragged. Kestrel leaned closer, straining to hear her. Where are they? Cellar, she whispered, her voice fading. Under the stairs, hidden, her eyes fluttered closed. Kestrel felt for a pulse. Weak, almost imperceptible. He knew she didn't have much time. Lily. Rose, she breathed again, her last words a prayer. Then her hand went limp in his. He closed her eyes, a wave of grief washing over him. He hadn't known her, not really. But he'd seen her kindness, her love for her children. And now he was bound to them by a promise made to a dying woman. He stood, his resolve hardening. He had a new mission now. A mission of protection, not destruction. He had to find Lily and Rose. He turned towards the stairs, the heat intensifying with every step. He remembered the cellar door, hidden beneath a rug. He kicked aside the burning remnants of the floor covering and found it. Smoke billowed out as he wrestled it open. He descended into the darkness, the air cooler but thick with smoke. Lily? Rose, he called, his voice barely audible above the roar of the fire. He heard a whimper. He followed the sound, stumbling through the darkness until he saw them, huddled together in a corner, their faces buried in each other's shoulders. Lily was trying to shield Rose from the smoke, coughing fitfully. "Lily? Rose? It's all right. I'm here to help." Lily looked up, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Mama," she croaked. Kestrel's heart clenched. He couldn't tell her. "Not yet. We need to get out of here," he said gently, extending a hand. "Come on. I'll take you somewhere safe." Through the inferno. The cellar air hung thick with smoke, stinging Kestrel's eyes. He coughed, pulling his damp tunic higher over his nose and mouth. "Lily? Rose?" His voice was a raspy whisper against the roar of the fire above. A small hand gripped his. "Lily." Beside her, Rose clung to Lily's skirt, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Mama." Lily's voice trembled. Kestrel knelt, his heart aching. "Your mother, she wanted me to take care of you." He avoided her gaze. Lies, even gentle ones, tasted like ash. Lily's grip tightened. "Take us where?" "To safety," he said, rising. "Follow me and stay close. Don't let go." He led them through the cellar, keeping low to the ground where the air was marginally cleaner. The wooden door groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a world consumed by fire. Flames danced on the dry grass, licking at the trees. The air throbbed with heat. Kestrel shielded the girls with his body, scanning the landscape. He knew this land, knew the paths the animals used, the dips and hollows that offered the slightest protection. He had to reach the river. It was the only chance. "We have to go that way," he pointed towards a break in the flames, a swathe of scorched earth leading towards the distant line of trees that marked the riverbank. "Keep your heads down. Run when I tell you." He hoisted Rose onto his back. She was light, but her small arms tightened around his neck like a vice. Lily took his hand, her small fingers digging into his palm. He could feel her fear, a cold knot in his own stomach. They moved quickly, skirting the edges of the blaze. Embers rained down, stinging their skin. The smell of burning wood and flesh filled the air, acrid and suffocating. The heat was intense, radiating from the ground and the flames that crackled all around them. A burning branch crashed to the ground in front of them, sending sparks flying. Kestrel pulled the girls back, shielding them with his body. "Stay behind me," he growled, kicking at the burning wood, clearing a path. Lily stumbled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I can't see." Kestrel stopped, kneeling beside her. He tore a strip of cloth from his tunic and wet it with water from his water skin. He tied it over her mouth and nose. "Breathe through this. It will help." He did the same for Rose, adjusting the makeshift mask so it wouldn't slip. They pressed on, the river their only beacon. The ground was hot beneath their feet, the air thick with smoke. Kestrel felt sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. He pushed them forward, urging them on with words of encouragement, his voice hoarse. He knew their strength was failing. Finally, they reached the trees. The air was cooler here, the fire less intense. They stumbled into the undergrowth, collapsing onto the muddy bank of the river. Rose, still clinging to Kestrel's back, was coughing, her small body shaking. Lily lay beside him, gasping for breath. Kestrel plunged his hands into the cool water, splashing it over their faces. Rose whimpered, burying her face in his neck. Lily sat up, her eyes wide with fear. "Are we safe now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kestrel looked back at the inferno that raged behind them, the flames licking at the sky. The river offered a temporary respite, but the fire would eventually burn itself out, leaving behind a wasteland. He was no longer a warrior with a mission, but a protector in a world consumed by chaos. He looked at the two small faces, streaked with dirt and tears, and knew his journey had only just begun. "For now," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For now, we are safe." But the uncertainty in his heart was a heavy weight. He didn't know what to do next, where to go, or how to protect them from the world outside the fire. All he knew was that he had made a promise, and he would keep it no matter the cost. He would lead them through the inferno and somehow find them a new home. The hidden cave. The river offered a fleeting balm, its waters rinsing away the grime and immediate horror, though the cold knifed through their thin clothes. They couldn't linger. Kestrel carefully hefted Rose onto his back, the little girl trembling despite the embers still radiating from her skin. Lily's small hand vice-gripped his, a surprising strength in her tiny fingers. "Shelter," he rasped, his voice gravelly from the smoke. "Before dusk swallows us whole." He steered them from the bank, angling towards the foothills. The ground was a treacherous jumble of scree and thorny scrub. Rose remained unnervingly silent, her breath a shallow flutter against his neck. Lily faltered with each step, her eyes puffy and bloodshot. He paused often, doling out precious sips of water. Each forward movement was a hard-won victory. He was no longer a predator, but a guardian, shepherding his charges across a hostile land. As the sun bled orange and violet across the horizon, Kestrel quickened his pace, his senses on high alert, searching for any sign of threat, be it beast or man. He recalled a sanctuary, a secluded cave tucked into the mountains, a place of quiet contemplation from a life now shed. The climb would be arduous, but it offered sanctuary, and that was paramount. Reaching the mountain's base was but the prelude. The ascent proved perilous, the trail a sinuous ribbon clinging to the cliff face. Rose remained a dead weight on his back, his muscles screaming in protest. Lily, however, displayed a fierce resilience, propelled by a raw survival instinct. He coaxed her onward with hushed words, reminding her of her mother's fortitude, of the sacred vow they had made. Finally, after an age of struggle, the cave mouth materialized. It was cramped, offering just enough space for the three of them, but the entrance was veiled by a dense curtain of ivy, providing natural concealment. Inside, the air hung cool and heavy, the only sound their labored breathing. He gently lowered Rose to the rocky floor and turned to Lily. "Find some dry kindling," he directed, gesturing towards a pile of fallen branches near the opening. "We need a fire's heart." Lily nodded, her gaze clear and resolute. She moved with newfound resolve, a spark of life rekindled in her face. Kestrel observed her, a complex mix of awe and anxiety churning within him. He traded a life of calculated precision for one of messy, unpredictable devotion. Trained to extinguish life, not foster it. Yet here he stood, responsible for two orphaned souls, their fates intertwined with his own. He began clearing a central space, arranging stones to form a rudimentary hearth. Lily returned, her arms laden with wood, her cheeks flushed with effort. Together, they coaxed a small blaze to life, casting dancing specters on the cave walls. The warmth proved a welcome solace, banishing the encroaching chill and offering a sense of fragile peace. Rose stirred, whimpering softly. Kestrel knelt beside her, smoothing her hair. "It's all right," he murmured. "We're safe for now." He wished he could offer them more than hollow assurances, but protection was the only certainty he could provide at present. He gazed at the two girls, their faces bathed in the fire's glow, their eyes reflecting a kaleidoscope of fear and hope. He was a stranger, a warrior haunted by shadows, yet they entrusted him completely. He wondered if they sensed the change within him, the metamorphosis from executioner to guardian. The path ahead remained cloaked in peril. He had no provisions, no strategy, no destination in mind. He was a hunter without a prey, a soldier without a conflict. But he carried a solemn promise. A vow made to a woman on her deathbed, a pledge seared into his very being. And he would move heaven and earth to safeguard Lily and Rose, even if it demanded the sacrifice of everything he once held dear. The future was veiled in uncertainty, a landscape of shadows, but in the flickering firelight, he saw a fragile dawn, a reason to persevere, a reason to endure. New family. Their existence assumed a predictable cadence, a rhythm born of exigency. Before the sun breached the horizon, Kestrel would stir. His body a chorus of aches protesting the cold, unforgiving stone. Rose remained asleep, a frail silhouette against the dark fabric of his cloak. But Lily was invariably awake, her gaze mirroring the nascent flames he resurrected each morning. "Water," he'd rasp, and with silent efficiency, Lily would seize the hide, tanned from a rabbit he'd trapped, a skill he'd demonstrated. She'd scramble out, bound for the hidden spring he'd located. During these hushed interludes, he'd tend to Rose's wound, still stubbornly inflamed despite his rudimentary care. The fever clung to her. His medical knowledge was paltry, relying on instinct and fleeting echoes of his grandmother's whispered lore remedies once deemed superstitious, now haunting him with their potential. Lily returned, her cheeks painted crimson by the crisp air and the exertion of her task. They shared a sparse meal of dried berries and whatever morsel Kestrel had managed to procure. Then came instruction. "Observe." He'd begin one morning, indicating a cluster of hardy plants clinging to the slope. "Edible. The leaves, never the roots. Memorize the form, the texture. When in doubt, abstain." He illuminated the subtle language of animal tracks, distinguishing between benign serpents and those bearing venom. He showed Lily how to construct rudimentary snares, her small digits surprisingly adept at mirroring his actions. Rose, wordless, remained a spectator at the cave mouth, her stare distant. He attempted to draw her in, gently placing a smooth rock in her palm, demonstrating how to hone it against another. But she seemed sequestered in her own reality, unreachable. One evening, as the fire spat and crackled, Lily inquired, "Tell us about your family." Kestrel recoiled inwardly. He'd avoided the subject of his past, of the Skywata clan, of the brutal tutelage that had pruned away everything but his lethal proficiency. But he saw genuine yearning in Lily's expression, a deep-seated need for connection. After a moment he yielded, his voice gravelly and unfamiliar. He recounted tales of the Skywata, their reverence for the towering peaks, their elaborate rituals, their unyielding autonomy. He spoke of hunts, ceremonies, their profound kinship with the land. He omitted the cold-blooded executions, the blood feuds, the darkness that had consumed him. Lily absorbed every word, her eyes gleaming with reflected firelight. Even Rose seemed to rouse, her attention fixed on Kestrel's face. "Did you have siblings?" Lily pressed gently. He nodded, a sharp stab of sorrow piercing him. Sisters he would likely never embrace again. Sisters who probably believed him dead, or worse, a renegade. He spoke of Alara, her deadly accuracy, with a bow. He painted a picture of her laughter, her uncanny ability to mimic avian calls. He described the intricate beadwork she fashioned, each creation a self-contained narrative. As he spoke, he registered a flicker of understanding in Rose's gaze, the faintest ghost of a smile gracing her lips. For the first time since the blaze, he witnessed a spark of vitality in her, a glimmer of promise. Days melted into weeks. The cave transformed into a sanctuary. Lily blossomed, her confidence growing daily. She foraged for kindling, assisted with food preparation, and even managed to elicit a few hesitant syllables from Rose. One afternoon, Lily approached him, her expression somber. "Kestrel," she began, using his name for the first time. "I want you to teach me to fight." He regarded her, taken aback. "Fight? Why would you want that?" "To shield Rose," she declared, her tone resolute. "And to defend us." He saw steely determination in her young eyes, an unshakable conviction. Refusal was impossible. He had pledged to their mother he would safeguard them. And now Lily was prepared to champion that protection herself. He gave a slow nod. "Very well, Lily," he conceded. "I will teach you." He pressed the small stone dagger he'd crafted for her into her waiting hand. "First," he instructed, "you must learn stillness. Silence. How to truly listen. Echoes of the past." Lily's small hands, already bearing the marks of hard work, sifted through the collected berries with practiced ease. Unsuitable ones, bruised or marred by insects, were dismissed with a flick of her wrist, her brow creased in concentration. Kestrel, sharpening his knife nearby, observed her. The constant whisper of steel against stone formed the backdrop to their lives. She was growing skillful, swift, a miniature adult in a world that demanded too much too soon. It stirred both admiration and a deep melancholy within him. "These are good, Kestrel," she announced, displaying a cluster of plump, deep purple fruit. "Enough for Rose's tonic?" He nodded. "More than sufficient. You have the eye of a hawk, Lilyflower." He rarely indulged in terms of affection, finding them clumsy on his tongue, yet Lily seemed to thrive on them, and he found his resolve softening more often than he liked. Emotional distance had always been his shield, but these girls were slowly dismantling his defenses. The aroma of wood smoke, a comforting presence, permeated the air, an olfactory reassurance that stood in stark opposition to the stinging reek of the blaze that haunted his dreams. He glanced at the rudimentary shelter he had constructed, a lean-to built against the shelter of a rocky overhang. Rose was resting inside, hopefully gaining some respite. The fever still ebbed and flowed, draining her vitality and leaving her wan and listless. Lily gently deposited the berries into a small woven basket. "I'll take them to her." A moment's hesitation, then her gaze darted towards Kestrel. "She asked about Mama again today." His hand froze on the sharpening stone. The question loomed, a dark cloud he had been desperately trying to outrun. He forced himself to meet her questioning gaze. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her Mama was watching over us." Lily's voice, though quiet, possessed a surprising strength. Is that all right?" "It's kind." He pushed himself to his feet, the familiar ache in his muscles a grounding reminder of his physical form, of his duty. "I'll go check on her." Rose lay curled on her side, her face thin, her eyes unnaturally large and luminous. She clutched a threadbare doll, its embroidered features worn smooth by time and affection. "Kestrel," her voice, a mere breath, barely audible. He knelt beside her, careful not to disturb the fragile structure. "Lily said you were asking about your mother." A solitary tear traced a path down her pale cheek. I miss her tales, and her melodies. He swallowed, his throat constricting. He possessed no repertoire of lullabies or comforting stories. His own youth had been steeped in the brutal lessons of survival, the harsh realities of combat. A pony had been his guide, his teacher, but she had never softened the edges, never offered solace. Strength, discipline, obedience, these were the virtues she had instilled. I don't know any songs, Rose, he confessed, the words sounding inadequate even to his own ears. But I can tell you a story, if you'd like. Her eyelids flickered, then lifted, a spark of interest kindling in their depths. A real story. He paused, sorting through the memories he typically kept suppressed. He could recount tales of tracking, of survival, of the hunt. But those felt wrong, somehow discordant with her delicate state. Once there was a boy, he began, his voice raspy, unaccustomed to such tenderness. He lived high in the mountains, far to the north. He was trained as a warrior, but his heart yearned to see the world beyond the snowy peaks. He dreamt of emerald forests and rushing rivers, of vibrant cities and sweeping plains. He described the landscapes he had briefly encountered during his travels, the dazzling spectrum of colors, the strange and wonderful creatures. He carefully omitted the violence, the bloodshed, the grim realities of his past, painting a picture of a world overflowing with wonder and enchantment. As he spoke, Rose's breathing grew deeper, her grip on the doll relaxing. He continued his narrative, weaving a rich tapestry of imagined escapades until her eyes finally drifted shut and her face softened into a semblance of peacefulness. He remained there for a long while, watching her sleep, the echoes of his own long-forgotten aspirations stirring within him. He recalled his own mother, a fleeting impression of warmth and kindness, a face fading into the hazy recesses of memory. He had been too young when she perished to retain more than a feeling, a profound sense of absence. A pony had filled the void with purpose, with discipline, but she had never replaced the love. He touched Rose's brow, feeling the lingering heat of the fever. He would safeguard them. He would keep them from harm. He would secure a future for them, even if it demanded the sacrifice of everything he had ever held dear. He owed them that much. He owed it to the memory of the woman who had perished in his arms, entrusting him with the well-being of her daughters. And perhaps, he mused, he owed it to the specter of the boy who had once dreamed of a world beyond the mountains. Whispers in the wind. Rose coughed, a dry, rattling sound that clawed at Kestrel's gut. He adjusted the damp cloth on her forehead, continuing the tale he'd started earlier. And the little sparrow, though small, had the heart of a lion. It faced the storm head-on, its tiny wings beating against the wind. Lily returned, her small hands stained crimson with berries. She still feels hot, she whispered, offering a handful to Kestrel. He shook his head, urging her to eat. Did you find many? Enough, Lily replied, but her eyes were fixed on Rose, worry etched deep within them. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the ancient pines that sheltered their makeshift camp. It carried with it a new scent, acrid and sharp, a phantom reminder of the inferno that had stolen their lives. It also carried voices. Kestrel stiffened, his senses on high alert. He placed a finger to his lips, silencing Lily. The voices were faint, carried on the wind, but undeniably human. He crept to the edge of their concealed clearing, peering through the dense foliage. Below, winding along the game trail that skirted the mountain's base, was a party of men on horseback. Nothing but ashes, a gruff voice said, the words carried clearly on a sudden gust. Another voice, deeper and more measured, replied, Thorn, you said there might be survivors. Kestrel's breath caught in his throat. Thorn. He knew that name. Elias Thorn was a man of the mountains, a respected farmer and a man known for his resolve. He was also known for his unwavering loyalty to his community. Kestrel watched as Thorn dismounted, his gaze sweeping the landscape. He was a sturdy figure, his weathered face grim, his eyes narrowed against the setting sun. There should have been, Thorn said, his voice heavy with a mixture of grief and something else, suspicion. The fire was too convenient. One of the other men scoffed. Convenient for who, Thorn? The wolves? Thorn ignored the jibe. He pointed to a faint trail leading upwards towards the very slope where Kestrel and the girls were hidden. Track small ones. And something was dragged. Check it out. Panic clenched Kestrel's chest. He retreated silently back to the girls, his mind racing. They were searching. Not just for bodies, but for survivors. For answers. Lily, he said, his voice low and urgent. I need you to be brave. And quiet. There are men searching the mountain. They found the farm. Lily's eyes widened, fear momentarily eclipsing her worry for Rose. Will they hurt us? I won't let them, Kestrel vowed, his hand instinctively moving to the hidden knife beneath his tunic. But we need to move. Now, he scooped Rose into his arms. Her fevered body felt fragile against his own. Lily, her face pale but resolute, followed close behind as he led them deeper into the wilderness, away from the searching eyes and the unsettling whispers carried on the wind. Thorn was no fool. Kestrel knew that if he found the tracks, he would follow them. And if he found them, Kestrel would have to make a choice. Protect the girls or disappear back into the shadows, leaving them to face whatever fate awaited them. The wind howled, a mournful sound that echoed his own internal turmoil. He had traded one prison for another, but this one, he realized, was built of love, of duty, of a promise he intended to keep. A fevered plea. The cave's frigid breath settled on Lily, a clammy weight. A shiver racked her frame, born not just of the chill, but from a shared terror that echoed in Kestrel's eyes. Rose remained deathly still, her breath shallow like the flutter of a trapped bird. More water, Kestrel rasped, his concern roughening his voice. Deferentially, Lily soaked a rag in melted snow he'd collected, dabbing Rose's forehead. The fever raged hotter than any forge, rendering his carefully crafted wildflower poultices useless. He watched Lily, noticing the slight falter in her stride, the tremor that now plagued her hands as she wrung the cloth. The vibrant spark usually dancing in her eyes had been replaced by a weary pallor. He touched her forehead, a faint but alarming heat blooming beneath his rough touch. "Lily," he murmured, "are you all right?" Her denial came too quickly, a frantic shake of her head. "Just tired, Kestrel." "Really?" But the lie lay exposed in the bruised shadows blooming beneath her eyes. A chilling realization dawned on him. A downward spiral had begun. Illness had the potential to cascade, and this jagged peak was no place for vulnerability. He had to intervene, and quickly. His limited knowledge of herbs had proved insufficient. They needed real medicine, the practiced hand of a healer. They needed the settlers. The thought was a plunge into icy water. Contacting them was unthinkable, surrendering everything he'd sacrificed to protect. Thorn's unwavering, flinty gaze materialized in his mind. But Rose's fading life, now interwoven with Lily's failing health, outweighed even that. "Rest," he urged, guiding her down beside her sister. "I need to check the traps." He exited the cave, the wind a brutal slap across his face. He didn't bother with the traps. Instead, he scrambled higher, seeking a commanding view. From that vantage, he spied the telltale tendrils of smoke rising from the valley, a signal that the relentless pursuit hadn't waned. He could almost feel Thorn's scrutiny, an invisible weight boring into the mountainside. He surveyed the landscape, hunting for a less obvious approach, a way to reach them without detection. But the unforgiving terrain offered no easy passage. The mountain kept its secrets. Re-entering the cave, he found Lily nestled against Rose, her eyes wide with trepidation. "Kestrel," she whispered, her voice thin and strained. "I heard them. They're closer, talking about the fire, about—" Her voice dissolved, unable to give shape to the terror that choked the air. He knelt beside her, enfolding her small hand in his. It was ice, bone-cold. "They won't find us, Lily. I promise you." The words, though spoken with conviction, felt hollow even to him. He knew what he must do. "Lily," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging within. "I need you to be strong. Rose needs medicine. I have to try and get some." Her eyes widened in alarm. "But the men, I know, it's dangerous. That's why I need your courage. I need you to stay here and watch over Rose. Can you do that?" She nodded, her delicate chin quivering. "If anyone comes, hide. Don't make a sound. Understand?" Another affirmation. He drew his knife, the one once intended for her parents. A familiar pang of remorse resonated, but he suppressed it. He would repurpose it to shield their daughters. He tore a strip of cloth from his tunic and offered it to Lily. "If I'm not back by sunrise, take this. Find Thorn. Tell him you need help. Tell him you're Rose and Lily." Tears spilled from her eyes, tracing wet paths down her cheeks. "You're leaving us?" "No," he replied, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. "I'm coming back. I swear it. But if I can't, you need to be safe." He gathered them both in a fierce embrace, lingering to etch their faces into his memory, to inhale the fragile scent of their hair. He might never have this chance again. He rose, resolve hardening like ice. "I'll return." He turned and strode out of the cave, abandoning the only family he'd ever known. venturing into the precarious unknown, a desperate gamble for their survival. The mountain wind carried his silent plea. Shield them, a bridge of trust. Each downward step amplified Kestrel's internal turmoil. The forest, alive with whispers and brittle snaps, mirrored the precariousness of his desperate gamble. He envisioned Thorn's skeptical gaze, the inevitable interrogation, and pushed onward, propelled by the searing memory of Rose's feverish skin and Lily's fading vitality. Fortune favored him, or perhaps desperation sharpened his senses. A small band, a dozen souls etched with resolve, advanced along the slope. Flickering torchlight painted their faces with shades of concern and determination. At their forefront strode Thorn, shoulders rigid, eyes sweeping the terrain. Choosing his moment, Kestrel emerged from a dense thicket of pines. The sudden appearance caught them off guard. Torches flared higher, reflecting off polished axe blades and gun barrels. A collective intake of breath rippled through their ranks. "Halt!" Thorn's gruff command sliced through the air. He peered into the gloom, trying to discern Kestrel's form. "Identify yourself." Kestrel raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, a pathetically inadequate symbol given his history. "I need your help," he croaked, his voice ragged. The plea hung in the night, heavy with the burden of his transgressions. He saw recognition dawn in Thorn's features, the understanding of who stood before him. Weapons remained trained on his person, unwavering. "You," Thorn growled, his voice laced with danger. "The Pyre's phantom." Kestrel nodded, his throat constricting. "Yes, but I come in peace. 2 young girls are gravely ill, consumed by fever. They are in the mountains, and without aid they will perish." A murmur stirred through the group, a blend of mistrust and fury. One man spat, a gesture of contempt. "Believe you? After your treachery?" "I understand your doubts," Kestrel replied, his gaze locked on Thorn. "I deserve none of your kindness. But these children are innocent. One burns with sickness, the other wanes. Please, I implore you, save them." He felt the palpable weight of their animosity, the embers of rage he himself had ignited. All he could offer was stark, unadorned truth. Thorn remained implacable, his gaze intense. He scrutinized Kestrel's face, searching for any hint of deceit. The dancing firelight mirrored a flicker of something else in his gaze, perhaps calculation. "Why should we extend such grace?" Thorn finally asked, his tone still harsh, but laced with a hint of something more, a consideration, perhaps. "You have no reason," Kestrel conceded. "But their survival rests on your mercy. They are Rose and Lily, daughters of Martha and Thomas. I saved them from the conflagration." The mention of Martha's name resonated through the group. A sob escaped a woman in the back. Thorn's features grew harder still, yet his eyes flickered with a shadow of grief. "And what proof do we have of their identity?" "Lily wears a locket enclosing their mother's portrait. Rose clutches a wooden doll, their father's handiwork. These are their most cherished possessions," Kestrel said, his voice cracking. Thorn addressed the others in hushed tones, his words lost to Kestrel. The discussion was brief, yet impassioned. Kestrel stood frozen, his fate suspended. Finally Thorn turned back, his expression inscrutable. "If this is deception, it isn't," Kestrel asserted, cutting him off. "I swear it upon my life." Thorn gave a slow nod. "Very well. We shall assist you. But you will lead us disarmed, and answer all our inquiries. Is that understood?" Kestrel exhaled, relief washing over him in a wave of dizziness. "Yes. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." He pivoted and led them back towards the peaks, the torches carving a path through the darkness. He understood that this was merely the opening act, the genesis of a protracted and arduous endeavor. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered. But for Rose and Lily, he would gamble everything to forge it. With each upward step, Kestrel could only pray that he had made the right decision. He understood the magnitude of his request, to have these people trust the one who came to destroy them. But with the girls' very lives hanging in the balance, he had no other course but to try.